The Canadian wilderness has always held a special kind of magic, a vast, untamed realm where ancient forests whisper secrets to those who listen, where crystal-clear rivers carve through valleys carved by glaciers, and where the night sky blazes with more stars than city dwellers could ever imagine. In the summer of 1982, one ordinary yet deeply loving family chose this wild paradise for what they believed would be the perfect bonding trip, a chance to escape the routines of modern life and reconnect across 3 generations under the open sky. Little did they know that their dream vacation in the remote Clearwater Valley near Wells Grey Provincial Park would become one of Canada's most haunting tragedies, ending in 6 lives lost and a confession so twisted that it would shock even seasoned investigators. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, thank you for joining us as we dive deep into stories that blur the line between beauty and terror. A big warm welcome to all our loyal subscribers. Your support means the world and keeps these immersive journeys possible. Drop a comment below right now. Tell me where you're watching from today and what time it is in your part of the world. Are you tucked away in a cozy city apartment out on a late night drive, or perhaps somewhere with your own campfire crackling nearby? I'd love to hear from you. And if you crave even more dark, atmospheric true crime and nightmare-inducing tales, make sure to check out my second channel, Nightmare Nexus, where we explore the shadows that lurk just beyond the everyday. Now, let's step back to August 1982. The air in British Columbia carried that crisp, pine-scented promise of adventure. George and Edith Bentley, a devoted couple in their late 50s and early 60s, had driven up from the Vancouver area, their hearts full of anticipation. George, a hard-working man with a gentle smile and stories from years of family life, and Edith, warm and nurturing, the kind of grandmother whose hugs felt like home. They were meeting up with their daughter Jackie Johnson, 41, her husband Bob, 44, and their 2 bright-eyed daughters, Janet, 13, and Karen, 11. The Johnsons hailed from Kelowna, bringing with them the energy and laughter that only children can infuse into any gathering. This wasn't just any getaway. It was a carefully planned 2-week escape into the heart of Wells Grey Provincial Park and the surrounding wilderness, a place renowned for its thundering waterfalls like Dawson Falls and Helmicken Falls, dense old-growth forests of Douglas fir and cedar, and abundant wildlife. The family had chosen a secluded spot along the Clearwater Valley Road, far from the busier campgrounds, an abandoned logging or prison camp area reclaimed by nature, offering the ultimate sense of privacy and immersion. They arrived in 2 vehicles, loaded with tents, coolers brimming with fresh food, fishing rods, hiking boots, and all the makings of unforgettable memories. From the moment they set up camp, the trip felt blessed. Mornings began with the soft light filtering through the towering trees, mist rising from the nearby creek like a gentle veil. The girls, Janet with her curious, adventurous spirit, and Karen with her playful giggles, would race to the water's edge, skipping stones or trying to spot trout gliding beneath the surface. Bob, a steady and affectionate father, taught them the basics of fly fishing, his patience matching the slow rhythm of the river. Jackie prepared hearty meals over the campfire, bacon and eggs sizzling in the pan, the aroma mixing with wood smoke and pine. Grandparents George and Edith shared tales from their own youth, watching with quiet pride as their granddaughters explored, their faces lit by the golden glow of dawn. Days blended into a perfect rhythm of exploration and rest. They hiked gentle trails where wildflowers dotted the forest floor and birdsong filled the air. Afternoons might involve berry picking or simply lounging in the dappled shade, reading books or playing cards. Evenings were magical. The family gathered around the crackling fire, roasting marshmallows, singing old songs, and sharing dreams for the future. Janet talked excitedly about starting high school that fall, while Karen dreamed aloud of one day becoming a veterinarian, caring for animals in these very woods. The adults spoke of gratitude for health, for family, for this rare chance to slow down in a world that moved too fast. The Canadian wilderness embraced them fully. Moose occasionally wandered near the campsite at twilight, their massive forms moving with surprising grace. Eagles soared overhead, and at night the howl of wolves or the hoot of owls added a thrilling, primal soundtrack. There were no crowds, no schedules, just the pure joy of being together. The isolation felt like a gift, miles from the nearest town of Clearwater, with only the occasional distant rumble of a vehicle on the valley road to remind them of the outside world. They had chosen this spot precisely for its seclusion, a place where 3 generations could create bonds that would last a lifetime. As one peaceful day melted into the next, the family grew even closer. Laughter echoed through the trees, stories were swapped, and small moments of wonder accumulated like treasures. The thrill of catching their first fish together. The awe of watching a sunset paint the mountains in hues of fiery orange and deep purple. The comfort of falling asleep to the gentle patter of rain on tent fabric. No one sensed any shadow lurking beyond the firelight. The wilderness, with its majestic silence and endless green canopy, seemed only to promise serenity and renewal. Yet, in the vast expanse of those ancient forests, eyes that did not belong to the family had begun to watch. A local man familiar with the backroads and hidden clearings had noticed the two vehicles parked near the remote site. He observed from a distance the happy interactions, the innocent play of the children, the vulnerability of a group so far from help. What started as casual curiosity would soon twist into something far darker, a plan born in the shadows that would shatter this perfect family idyll forever. The Bentleys and Johnsons had no way of knowing that their dream trip was approaching its final, unsuspecting evening. The campfire flickered warmly that night, casting long, dancing shadows among the trees as stories and songs lingered in the cool mountain air. For now, all was still right with their world, a snapshot of love and adventure in the heart of British Columbia's untamed beauty. The fire had burned low, embers glowing like dying stars against the velvet blackness of the Canadian night. The family had retired to their tents, exhausted but content after another day filled with laughter and discovery. The wilderness around them felt alive yet protective, the distant call of a loon echoing across an unseen lake. No one heard the soft crunch of boots on pine needles or the careful approach of a figure moving through the trees with deliberate, predatory patience. David Shearing, a 24-year-old local man from the nearby area, had been watching the campsite for days. He knew these back roads intimately, the abandoned logging clearings, the forgotten trails that led deep into the forest where few ventured. What began as idle curiosity from a passing vehicle had grown into an obsessive fixation. The sight of the happy family, especially the two young girls with their bright energy and innocent laughter, stirred something dark and uncontrollable within him. In the isolation of the Clearwater Valley, miles from any real help, opportunity had presented itself, and Shearing made a cold, calculated decision. That night, under the cover of darkness, he struck with terrifying efficiency. The adults were taken by surprise in their tents. George and Edith Bentley, Jackie and Bob Johnson, 4, lives extinguished in a brutal, execution-style attack that left little room for struggle or outcry. The gunfire was muffled by the dense forest, swallowed by the vast wilderness that had so recently felt like a sanctuary. The children, Janet and Karen, awoke to unimaginable horror. Their screams pierced the night as they were dragged from their sleeping bags, forced to witness the nightmare unfolding around them. Shearing bound them and took them deeper into the woods, away from the campsite that now bore silent witness to unspeakable violence. What followed over the next several days was a descent into pure terror for the two young sisters. Held captive in the remote wilderness, they were subjected to prolonged suffering that no child should ever endure. The dense canopy of cedar and fir blocked out much of the sunlight, turning day into an endless twilight of fear. Janet, the older at 13, tried desperately to stay strong for her little sister, whispering words of comfort even as her own world crumbled. Karen, just 11, clung to her sibling, her once playful spirit shattered by confusion and grief. They were moved from one hidden location to another, the unforgiving terrain, thick underbrush, rocky slopes, and mosquito-infested swamps making any thought of escape nearly impossible. Shearing's control was absolute in that isolated realm. The girls were forced to endure repeated trauma while the wilderness, once a place of wonder, became their prison. Campfires that had once hosted family songs now illuminated scenes of horror. The same rivers that had sparkled with trout now seemed indifferent to their plight. At night, the sounds that had brought joy, the hoot of owls, the rustle of leaves, now amplified every footstep, every whispered threat. The family's vehicles and belongings were eventually set ablaze in a desperate attempt to conceal evidence, the smoke rising unnoticed into the vast sky. Back in the outside world, concern began to build slowly. When the family failed to return home on schedule, relatives grew worried. Searches were organized, but the sheer size of the British Columbia wilderness made the task daunting. Wells Gray Provincial Park and the surrounding Clearwater Valley spanned hundreds of square kilometers of rugged, largely untouched land. Helicopters and ground teams scoured trails and roads, but initial efforts yielded nothing. The family had chosen their spot too well, too remote, too hidden. Weeks turned into months, and the disappearance remained a painful mystery, haunting the communities of Clearwater and beyond. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, the horror continued until Shearing, driven by his own twisted logic, ended the girl's suffering in a final act of brutality. He disposed of the remains in a way he believed would erase all traces, leaving the wilderness to slowly reclaim what was left. The Canadian wilds, with their cycles of growth and decay, held their secrets tightly. It was not until several months later, in the spring of 1983, that a devastating discovery was made. A group of hunters or forestry workers stumbled upon the burned-out shell of a vehicle in a remote clearing along the Clearwater Valley Road. Inside and around the wreckage were the charred remains of 4 adults. Dental records and personal items eventually confirmed the heartbreaking truth. George, Edith, Jackie, and Bob had been found. The vehicle had been deliberately torched, but the fire had not consumed everything. The discovery sent shockwaves through British Columbia and across Canada. A massive investigation was launched, one of the largest in the province's history at the time, involving multiple police agencies determined to find the missing girls and bring the perpetrator to justice. The tension in the community was palpable. Families who had once felt safe camping in these woods now locked their doors tighter at night. Rumors and fear spread through small towns. Who could have committed such an atrocity in a place meant for peace and reconnection? The investigation focused on locals familiar with the area, those who knew the hidden spots and backroads. David Shearing's name eventually surfaced through tips and circumstantial evidence. He was arrested in connection with the case, and as investigators pieced together the timeline, the horrifying picture began to emerge. Shearing initially denied involvement, but the weight of evidence mounted. The remote wilderness that had shielded the crime for months now offered fragments of truth, burn patterns, bullet casings, and witness accounts of a man matching his description in the area around the time of the disappearance. The girl's fate remained unknown, an agonizing gap that tormented the extended family and the public alike. As the case moved toward trial, the full scale of the tragedy weighed heavily on everyone involved. The once perfect family camping trip had become a symbol of how quickly safety could vanish in the embrace of nature's vast indifference. The emotional toll was immense. Grief-stricken relatives pleading for answers, a community grappling with the reality that evil could hide so easily among the trees. The stage was set for a courtroom confrontation that would reveal even darker layers, a confession that no one could have predicted, exposing the depths of one man's depravity and the final, devastating chapter of Janet and Karen's ordeal. The courtroom in Kamloops was heavy with silence as David Shearing stood before the judge and a stunned nation. The once remote wilderness tragedy had captured headlines across Canada, turning a family's dream vacation into a symbol of vulnerability and loss. By the time the trial unfolded in 1983, the burned vehicle and the remains of the 4 adults had already confirmed the worst for George, Edith, Jackie, and Bob. But the fate of 13-year-old Janet and 11-year-old Karen remained an agonizing void that haunted every conversation, every prayer offered by their devastated relatives. Shearing was convicted on 4 counts of first-degree murder for the adults. The evidence: ballistics, the deliberate burning of the vehicle, his familiarity with the Clearwater Valley backroads, left little room for doubt. He received the mandatory life sentence with no possibility of parole for 25 years. For many, it felt like a hollow victory. The girls were still missing, and the full horror of what had transpired in those silent forests remained locked inside the killer's mind. Families across British Columbia who loved the outdoors now carried a new, lingering fear whenever they pitched a tent or hiked a lonely trail. Months passed after the sentencing. Then, in a move that shocked even the most seasoned detectives, Shearing made the decision to speak. What began as a routine prison interview soon turned into one of the most chilling, unpredictable confessions in Canadian criminal history. Sitting calmly, almost matter-of-factly, he began to recount the events of that August night in 1982 with a cold detachment that sent shivers through the interviewers. He described approaching the campsite under cover of darkness, the swift and calculated elimination of the 4 adults, and then the abduction of the 2 terrified girls. But the confession went far beyond the initial attack. In graphic, emotionless detail, Shearing revealed how he had kept Janet and Karen alive for days, moving them between hidden campsites deeper in the wilderness, subjecting them to repeated sexual assaults and psychological torment, while the vast Canadian forest swallowed their cries for help. He spoke of the girls' bravery, how the older sister Janet tried to shield her younger sibling, offering what little comfort she could in the face of unrelenting horror. He described the final moments when he ended their lives, the method he used to dispose of their bodies, and how he believed the dense undergrowth and scavenging animals would ensure nothing would ever be found. The confession was devastating in its unpredictability. No one had anticipated the prolonged suffering the girls had endured, nor the casual way Shearing recounted it, as if describing a hunting trip rather than the destruction of two innocent lives and the shattering of an entire family. Investigators were left stunned by the level of premeditation and the killer's intimate knowledge of the remote terrain that had allowed him to evade detection for so long. Search teams, guided by Shearing's directions, eventually located the remains of Janet and Karen, bringing a grim closure to the physical search, but leaving emotional wounds that would never fully heal. The broader impact rippled outward like shockwaves through still water. In the small communities near Wells Gray Provincial Park, residents who had always celebrated the wilderness as a place of renewal and freedom now viewed it with wary eyes. Camping trips that once symbolized family bonding carried an undercurrent of caution. Parents held their children a little closer when planning outdoor adventures. The case became a somber reference point in discussions about safety in remote areas. Reminders to travel in groups, to register itineraries, and to recognize that even in the most beautiful corners of Canada, isolation could become danger. For the extended Bentley and Johnson families, the confession brought no real peace, only a final, brutal confirmation of what they had feared most. The laughter of Janet and Karen, the gentle wisdom of their grandparents, the steady love of their parents, all silenced in a place that should have offered only joy. Memorials were held, quiet gatherings where stories were shared and tears flowed freely. The Canadian wilderness, with its towering cedars and whispering pines, became both a gravesite and a living reminder of love lost too soon. In the decades that followed, the story of the Wells Gray murders has continued to resonate as a stark illustration of how quickly paradise can transform into nightmare. It serves as a cautionary tale about the dual nature of nature itself, majestic and indifferent, capable of cradling life and concealing death in equal measure. David Shearing's life sentence ensured he would never again walk free among the trees he once used as cover for his crimes, but the families he destroyed could never reclaim what was taken under that vast British Columbia sky. Today, when hikers pass through the Clearwater Valley or campers gather around evening fires in Wells Gray Provincial Park, the wind through the branches sometimes seems to carry faint echoes of laughter that was cut short. The thundering waterfalls still roar, the rivers still sparkle with trout, and the stars still blaze overhead. Yet beneath the beauty lies a deeper awareness. The wilderness does not distinguish between the innocent and the malevolent. It simply watches, silent and eternal, holding both wonder and horror in its ancient embrace. This case reminds us that evil does not always wear an obvious face. It can hide in plain sight, familiar with the same trails and clearings that families seek for escape. It teaches us the fragility of joy, the preciousness of time spent with loved ones, and the importance of cherishing every ordinary moment before it slips away forever. The perfect family camping trip that began with so much hope in the summer of 1982 ended in a confession no one predicted, leaving behind 6 lives gone and a sorrow that echoes through the Canadian wilderness to this day. If this story touched you, moved you, or chilled you, let me know in the comments. Share your thoughts, your own experiences in the outdoors, or any reflections this tragedy stirred in you. And remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the shadows. Until next time, stay safe out there, whether you're under city lights or beneath the stars.